We're here with Dominic Schiener, who's the co-founder of IOTA. So tell us a bit about your background and how IOTA came to be.
I'm originally from Italy, from a very small village in the northern part of Italy. And so I've been in this blockchain space since 2011. And I initially started out with mining, but then I made some money with that. But then I realized, hey, I need to do my own startup. So I was trying to set up one of the first cryptocurrency exchanges. And that is how I became kind of part of this first constellation of the crypto valley in Zug. So that is back in 2013. And as many of you know, Zug is kind of the ICO mecca right now. And my startup ended up failing, but then in 2015, we started to get full-time into IOTA. And so when it comes to the origin story of IOTA, I should perhaps talk why we actually created the technology itself. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to describe it not from a technology point of view, but really from an IT point of view, like what is really missing in the Internet of Things today. And so back in 2015, what we realized is that when it comes to the Internet of Things, for it to truly take off, we need to have a distributed ledger. Because what the distributed ledger enables us to do in IoT is three things. For one, we can do machine-to-machine payments. So it's no longer about client-server relationships. So it's really that one machine has a wallet and is able to pay another machine for a certain service or resource. That's the first thing. The second thing is data security. As many of you know, so cybersecurity and IoT is a huge, huge problem. And so there's still a lot of unknown problems to solve, known problems to solve. And so what you can do with the distributed ledger, you can input a hash of a data or data set itself and make it immutable. And through that, you can start building some very interesting security applications, like, for example, digital identities, especially also for machines. And the third thing is smart contracts, right? You want to automate certain processes in IT. And so, because we've been in this space for so long, and just so you know, we also created the first proof-of-stake blockchain, which is called NXC, back in 2013. And because we have this kind of deep knowledge when it comes to the technology, but also from the business point of view, we realized in 2015 that all of the current blockchain architectures are simply not able to scale and not able to operate in this IT environment. And so what we did then is we started to look at the blockchain architecture and simply realize, hey, like, we shouldn't think about scaling this one-dimensional chain. We should instead come up with a completely new concept. And that is how the Tangle came to be. And should I talk about what the Tangle is and how it works? Okay,
well, cool. we'll talk about that after, but you can go into it a bit.
Okay, cool. So, yeah. So the Tangle, the beautiful thing about the Tangle is that it's scalable. So it's a scalable distributed ledger that has no transaction fees. And the reason for that is it has a very different way to achieve consensus. So it's no longer miners that are there to do the consensus of the network in cycles, but it's really there that each network participant that executes a transaction also validates two previous transactions in the history. And the beautiful thing from that is that now it's a much more decentralized network, and we don't have to pay any subsidies to miners, and we can really scale the network by parallelizing the confirmations of the Tangle itself, of the transactions. And yeah, so that's kind of the origin story.
Okay, but how did you get into this whole space?
Oh yeah, for sure. So my background, so back then it was also kind of in this hacker scene. So I was #1 in Call of Duty, if some of you may know that. But I wasn't a no-life gamer, right? I was hacking the games back then, and because of that, I kind of slipped into this whole Bitcoin space as well, because I started earning money. And the interesting thing back then is I had to have a PayPal account to accept money. But the problem is, obviously, PayPal is very centralized. It has a lot of censorship, and it really brings you trouble if you're a very small enterprise trying to just do your business right. And so that is kind of how I slipped into this whole Bitcoin space. And what really intrigued me by Bitcoin and by blockchain itself is this concept of permissionless innovation. So anyone can benefit from technology, from the protocol, they can utilize it, and what they can really do is, by utilizing it, they can also participate in this entire ecosystem without any requirements, right? Anyone can participate, anyone can innovate. And that is what really intrigued me. That is why I then kind of realized, hey, I need to go full-time into this and dedicate my life to it.
So you talk about a machine economy. Can you tell us a bit more about that, how you envision that in the future?
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to the Internet of Things, it's no longer going to be about cloud computing. It's all going to be about fog and mist computing, meaning that we process the data locally in these environments. And that also means that it's no longer going to be at client-server relationships, but really about machine-to-machine transactions, machine-to-machine communication. And something that's very interesting for the future of IT is that we want to make it possible that one machine that has an excess resource like computation, storage, bandwidth, electricity, and so on and so forth, to be able to sell this resource on demand to another machine. And through that, we basically have this very simple economic transaction. One machine that wants to have data stored or data analyzed pays another machine to do this service. The other machine returns back the data set or the value. And through that, we basically establish this machine economy. So the most basic example here is really the future of mobility. So if we look at the car of the future, which is going to be autonomous and is going to be ownership. It's going to be ownership-less. Can you say that?
No.
Is ownership-less a word? Okay. You know what I mean. And so basically, this autonomous and independent vehicle is now able to earn money. So it has a wallet. A customer comes into the vehicle. It automatically makes this transaction per meter that you drive or whatever. And more interesting than that is that the car is not just there to earn money, but is also there to pay for the infrastructure and pay for certain service, like for charging, like for parking, toll stations, and so on and so forth. And through that, we basically get this fully autonomous machine economy. And just so you guys know why we are thinking about this machine economy, so when it comes to the Internet of Things, it's all about automation. We want to automate those processes. We want to automate our machines, make them smarter, and through that, we basically enable new applications, new business models to be built with it. But we don't just want to automate those machines, right, and those processes. We also want to provide full autonomy to those machines. Because if you provide full autonomy to those machines, they can really act independently. And the only way to give those machines autonomy is to give them a wallet, right? If they have a wallet, they can start paying for services, they can start earning money. And that's kind of the whole vision of this machine economy.
Now, you mentioned before the Tangle. So IOTA doesn't use blockchain technology, it uses Tangle. Can you elaborate a bit more about why the Tangle is better than blockchain?
Yeah, for sure. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the Tangle is better than blockchain. The Tangle is the first approach to a scalable distributed ledger. Everyone is still trying to figure out how can you make the existing blockchains work and scale. And so we were the first ones to actually go beyond this thinking of a one-dimensional chain and really think about this directed acyclic graph. And this DAG structure, in our opinion, is definitely going to be the future of distributed ledgers because blockchains have been proven to not work and not scale. So it's 2018, right? And so nothing is running in production. Everything is still a proof of concept. And I'm going to throw out a very controversial statement here, and I'm going to say that Bitcoin, Ethereum, IOTA, everything is still a proof of concept, right? None of those technologies, none of those protocols are really ready for mass markets. And so we really have to think beyond the existing solutions to come up with a scalable approach. And that is what the Tangle basically is. And the Tangle, like I said before, it was invented in 2015. And the major benefits of it are really no miners, so we don't have any miners to subsidize, and we also don't have any miners involved in the governance of the protocol itself. No transaction fees, right? If I send 1 cent in IOTA, the other party is able to receive 1 cent. And what's very unique about that is now you're actually able to run your business models on top of a distributed ledger much more confidently. Because one of the biggest problems, for example, with Bitcoin or Ethereum is we have those variable transaction fees. And many of you may remember ChangeTip, which was kind of pushed out of the market because transaction fees were too high, right? And so IOTA is really there to enable those micropayments. And the machine economy is all about micropayments. And the third thing that's also very interesting, but that's a bit more technical, is that the Tangle is also partition tolerant. What this means is that we can also make offline transactions. And this partition tolerance is actually our approach to really build up a very global and very scalable payment system with IOTA. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about what's coming in the future for IOTA?
Yeah, no, for sure. So perhaps one thing to mention here is that we are not a startup. So we are the first ones to register a non-profit foundation in Germany. So we are a regulated entity in Germany. by the government. And so our biggest interest is to really build a standard. And so like I said before, everything today is a proof of concept. And even though everyone is talking about those grandiose ideas, hey, we're going to disrupt $1 trillion lending market, most of it is just bullshit. Because none of those applications can really run in production. Like everything is still a proof of concept. And our biggest interest for 2018 is to really cross this chasm and go from a proof of concept towards a production-ready, enterprise-ready system. So that's what we're doing on the technology. And secondly, what we're doing on the ecosystem is really onboarding more and more companies. So recently or yesterday, I think, right? You know it. So yesterday we announced that the Chief Digital Officer of Volkswagen is joining the supervisory board of the IOTA Foundation. We also just recently had RBVC, so Robert Bosch Venture Capital, purchase some tokens. And we are also working more closely with Bosch and those big industrial companies to really figure, for one, we want to figure out what works and what doesn't when it comes to distributed ledgers and business models from those distributed ledgers. But also we want to work concretely with those big companies on partnerships to kind of build a standard. Because at the end of the day, we want to build a permissionless ecosystem where anyone can participate and where we truly have this machine economy. And what this means now is that we shouldn't fragment the entire ecosystem with those ICOs and stuff like that and tokens, but it's really all about having one main protocol being adopted by the entire industry. So we are really focusing on how can we really get the entire industry in those different verticals. So it's mobility, smart cities, agriculture, energy, and so on and so forth, where we're working with those key players to get them on board with the IOTA Foundation, then just work concretely on how we can build this standard. And I think in general, our biggest interest is to also support the ecosystem. So we have a bigger ecosystem fund where we're also supporting developers. So developers are everything kind of, right? Because you want to have people build stuff with your protocols. And so we're really focusing on how we can start engaging with the developer community on a much better level. And thirdly, we are also starting to develop new technologies. So the IOTA Foundation employs some of the leading experts when it comes to distributed ledgers, but also cryptography and distributed systems and so on and so forth. And we started out with IOTA, which is this transaction settlement protocol, and now we're starting to build other modules on top of the IOTA protocol that extend the core, but also we're starting to build new products and new software outside of IOTA. Yeah.
Cool. Now, we saw a big crash in the cryptocurrency market recently. Where do you think it's all going?
I mean, the crypto markets are just insane, right? And to be totally honest, there's just so much market manipulation also going on right now. And for us, because we are really trying to be very pragmatic, we're trying to be like really focus on how can we engage with the community, with the ecosystem, meaning corporates. The crypto markets is sometimes just too crazy, right? But when it comes to those cryptocurrencies themselves, even though the values are quite inflated and quite high, there's still like an underlying utility behind them, because you can only build a permissionless ecosystem with those cryptocurrencies, right? Else you have a permission system where only certain identities can participate, or you have to build your own consortium. And so in 2018, I think we're definitely going to see some major consolidation that's going to happen in this entire market. Because for one, ICOs are going to dry out, in my opinion, because for one, we haven't seen any solution come to the market yet that really delivers on their promises. And for another, it's just too much money being thrown around, and people are also being scammed. And so, in my opinion, also app coins don't make too much sense, because simply, like I said before, they fragment the ecosystem, and they don't really serve a certain utility or purpose most of the time. So we're going to see this major consolidation, and in my opinion, mostly 4 to 6 of the major blockchains and distributed ledgers out there are going to survive 2018, 2019. And the others are definitely going to be pushed out. Because at the end of the day, the thing that happened, so can I just go on about this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because this is just like my thinking. So in 2017, we kind of lost track of blockchain, right? The main reason why we did blockchain is to change society, to really improve our systems of the day, to solve the issues of trust, transparency, governance, and so on and so forth. And in 2017, we just completely lost sight of that, right? We all just went crazy about those ICOs and everyone wanting to buy a Lamborghini or something. And so I hope that in 2018 we'll go back to actually figuring out how can distributed ledgers actually solve fundamental problems. Because today, distributed ledgers and those cryptocurrencies are just making a few people rich, insanely rich. And that's not why I went into this space. And that's not where I think this is going to continue. So in 2018, definitely only the few major cryptocurrencies and the few major distributed ledgers that actually add value and actual utility will survive and prevail, which is why those partnerships with big corporates are so key.
Thank you. I'm curious to know, by the way, how many people in the room own IOTA tokens?
Yes. I'm just joking. I don't care.
Very cool. Do you guys have questions for Dominic? Go ahead.
If you want to do atomic swaps with IOTA, like, do you have another example of which blockchain you want to do this with?
I'm sorry, I did not understand what you said. What?
You were saying atomic swaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about atomic swaps?
Because it could replace IOTA. I mean, if we could
No.
okay, why not?
Because the efficiency is not there. The thing about atomic swaps is that you're still reliant on the underlying protocols of the different blockchains, right? And the main argument of IOTA is that the underlying protocol is super efficient, right? Because it's the Tangle environment. And what IOTA does really well
Can you
is...
speak slowly and louder? Make sure I understand.
Yeah, no, for sure. Should I repeat it?
Yes.
Okay. So atomic swaps, just so who here knows what atomic swaps are? Okay. This is a very basic explanation. Atomic swaps are a way to go from one blockchain token to another blockchain token in a trustless fashion. You don't rely on a cryptocurrency exchange for that, or a centralized party house. And he asked how that atomic swaps are going to replace IOTA, and so definitely not. Sorry? Oh, provocation. Oh, okay, I like that. Yeah, no, for sure. So atomic swaps. My main argument is that IOTA just does one thing really, really well, which is transaction settlement. So there's never going to be a protocol that does, if IOTA becomes production ready, right, and succeeds, there's never going to be a protocol that does transaction settlement better than IOTA. And that also means that the IOTA token is the most fungible in that regard, and the one with the highest transaction throughput. So atomic swaps are not going to replace IOTA. I think that atomic swaps are actually going to enable some interesting use cases as well. Interesting use cases with IOTA for asset transfers, asset trading.
Any other questions from the audience? Go ahead.
Are there areas where Bitcoin experience would be?
So we don't have smart contracts, right? We just do transaction settlement right now. Bitcoin, I don't know. Bitcoin probably not. So yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it was the same question, but did you say you are doing smart contracts or you're not? And if you're not, why not?
So we are working on an Oracle platform, which is what we announced on our roadmap in 2017. And that's what we work on right now.
Yeah, if one machine was to transfer some of its assets in a transaction to another machine, I think you mentioned electricity as an example, how would that, like in a real layman's terms, how would that actually happen? Electricity or bandwidth or something, getting from one machine to another machine?
Yeah, no, of course. So perhaps I should also how much time do we actually have? Let me just check. Oh, 2 minutes. The way that it would work is obviously that the charging station has a wallet, the car has a wallet, and in the first step, you want to do the identification. You want to say, hey, I'm a car, I'm a charging station. And that is the first problem already, right? There's no identity system today. And so leaving that aside, basically what we then enable is token streaming, so that the car streams tokens to the charging station. And what the charging station then does is that as soon as it receives a token, which obviously represents a value, it then starts releasing or opening up the electricity flow. And there's some interesting stuff that you can do here, because for one, this is really fully transparent, right? It's on a distributed ledger, you know what happened at each point in time. And for now, it's completely trustless, right? As soon as the payment streaming stops, the electricity flow also stops. And if the electricity flow stops, the payment streaming stops. So you don't need to even have a smart contract for this. It's super simple. And yeah. But there are some other interesting problems in that area when it comes to making this actually real-life adaptable. Just so you know, right now we are launching, so one thing that we are really working on as well is simulations. So we are launching a smart city simulator environment where we're basically simulating a charging infrastructure. So we have a smart city where there's a few hundred charging stations and a few hundred cars. And the interesting stuff about that is that everything is running on IOTA. So we're basically simulating a real-life city environment built on IOTA. And that's also going to launch before the end of this month, hopefully. So you should check that out.
All right. Do we have time for one more or no?
Hi. I got one more right here. Hi, Dominic. Thanks for the talk. Do you think IOTA had a fair bit of controversy? To what extent do you think that is due to like too much early media exposure? And do you think that's just an inevitable feature for a tokenized company?
Definitely the latter part, because at the end of the day, everyone is getting so much FUD in this space. Because like I said, there's just too much market manipulation happening. And it's too easy to go on Reddit with your troll army and say, hey, like this token is so much shit. And then the price goes down, you buy it up, and the price goes up again. And it's just how it works today. But the thing is, there's definitely also a lot of controversy simply because we are going against this establishment. Like we are saying, hey, blockchain doesn't work. We've come up with a completely different solution. And another thing is that we always say, like, we don't care about ideology. We care about really having a pragmatic view on the world and making sure that these systems, these protocols actually see a real world adoption. Like we don't care about ideology. Like I'm not going to fight a bunch of banks, right? Like Bitcoin does. And so there is always this infighting between the community. But there's also definitely some loose ends that we have to tie up on our side. Like for example, the wallet, which we've been improving over the last few months now, and hopefully have it released soon. And these are all kind of these community-related projects. One of the things that I mentioned before is that we were really focused on partnerships, not so much on community and like the whole cryptocurrency space. So we could have communicated there better sometimes, probably. But that's part of the game. Right. And just so you know, Ethereum and Ripple also during their initial stages got so much FUD from Bitcoin and so on and so forth. So it's not just IOTA.
Yeah, it's
but
fascinating how fear manipulation affect the market. Anyway, thank you very much, Dominic, for the talk. And thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.